the land of eternal mystery. For over 4 millennia, the majestic pyramids of Egypt have stood sentinel over the endless desert sands, their limestone faces weathered by time yet still defiant against the elements. These monuments, along with the countless temples, tombs, and artifacts scattered across the Nile Valley, held the secrets of one of humanity's greatest civilizations locked away in hieroglyphic silence. That silence was finally broken on a fateful day in July 1799, when French soldier Pierre-François Bouchard made a discovery that would change our understanding of the ancient world forever. During Napoleon Bonaparte's ambitious Egyptian campaign, Bouchard unearthed a large granite stone near the town of Rosetta, about 35 miles east of Alexandria. This seemingly ordinary slab, measuring 3 feet 9 inches high and 2 feet 4 inches wide, contained the same decree written in 3 different scripts: ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic script, and ancient Greek. The Rosetta Stone, as it came to be known, would prove to be the key that unlocked the linguistic mysteries of a civilization that had been silent for over 1,000 years. When French scholar Jean-François Champollion finally deciphered the hieroglyphic script in 1822, he opened the door to understanding not just the written language of ancient Egypt, but the thoughts, beliefs, dreams, and daily lives of a people who had built one of the world's most enduring civilizations. Through their own words, carved in stone and painted on papyrus, the ancient Egyptians could finally tell their story. The Greek historian Herodotus, often called the father of history, made a profound observation when he visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE. Egypt is the gift of the Nile. This simple statement captures the fundamental truth about Egyptian civilization, that everything about this remarkable culture, from its agricultural abundance to its religious beliefs, from its political structure to its artistic achievements, was intimately connected to the great river that flows northward through the heart of Africa. The Nile River, stretching over 4,000 miles from its sources in the Ethiopian highlands and the lakes of East Africa to its delta on the Mediterranean coast, created a narrow ribbon of fertility through an otherwise harsh desert landscape. This river was not merely a water source, it was the lifeline that made civilization possible in one of the world's most challenging environments. The annual flood cycle, as predictable as the rising and setting of the sun, brought life-giving silt and water to the fields, enabling the development of agriculture and consequently the complex society that would emerge along its banks. But Egypt's story begins long before the first pharaoh united the two lands, long before the first pyramid rose from the desert floor, and long before the first hieroglyph was carved in stone. It begins with the geological forces that shaped the land itself, with the gradual retreat of ancient seas, and with the slow carving of the Nile Valley through millions of years of erosion and deposition. This is the story of how a river created a civilization, and how that civilization, in turn, created wonders that continue to amaze us today. Chapter 1: Geological Foundation and Prehistoric Origins. To understand the rise of Egyptian civilization, we must first understand the land itself. The Nile Valley as we know it today began to take shape during the Miocene epoch, approximately 23 million years ago, when massive geological forces carved the river's path through the limestone and sandstone bedrock of northeastern Africa. Over millions of years, the river cut deeper into the landscape, creating the narrow valley that would become the cradle of one of humanity's greatest civilizations. The annual flood cycle that would prove so crucial to Egyptian civilization was established through this geological process. Each summer, monsoon rains in the Ethiopian highlands would swell the Blue Nile, while seasonal rains in East Africa would feed the White Nile. These two great tributaries would converge in Sudan and flow northward, carrying with them millions of tons of fertile silt. When the flood waters reached Egypt, they would spread across the valley floor, depositing this rich sediment and creating some of the most fertile agricultural land on Earth. Archaeological evidence suggests that human habitation in the Nile Valley extends back hundreds of thousands of years. During the Paleolithic period, early humans lived as hunter-gatherers, following the seasonal patterns of game animals and adapting to the changing climate of northeastern Africa. As the Sahara gradually became more arid during the Holocene period, beginning around 10,000 years ago, human populations increasingly concentrated along the Nile Valley, where water and resources remained abundant. The transition from hunter-gatherer societies to settled agricultural communities was a gradual process that unfolded over several millennia. By the end of the Paleolithic era, around 10,000 BCE, archaeological sites throughout Egypt show evidence of increasingly sophisticated tool-making, including the production of arrows, harpoons, grinding stones, sewed skins, bone tools, and pottery. These technological advances laid the groundwork for the agricultural revolution that would transform Egyptian society. Carbon-14 dating has revealed that by 4,250 BCE, organized agriculture was well established in Egypt. Archaeological excavations at sites near the Fayum oasis have uncovered Neolithic storage silos containing domesticated grains, providing concrete evidence of the transition to farming. These early agricultural communities learned to work with the Nile's flood cycle, planting their crops in the fertile mud left behind by the receding waters and harvesting them before the next flood season began. The development of agriculture had profound implications for Egyptian society. For the first time, communities could produce surplus food, which allowed some individuals to specialize in activities other than food production. This specialization led to the development of crafts, trade, and eventually complex social hierarchies. The need to coordinate irrigation systems and manage agricultural surpluses also necessitated the development of administrative systems and leadership structures that would eventually evolve into the pharaonic state. The earliest agricultural settlements were simple affairs, consisting of small villages of reed huts built on elevated ground to avoid the annual floods. The inhabitants cultivated wheat, barley, and flax, and they domesticated cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. They also continued to hunt wild animals and fish in the Nile and its marshes, supplementing their agricultural diet with protein from these sources. As agricultural techniques improved and populations grew, these early settlements began to develop more complex social structures. Archaeological evidence suggests that by 5000 BCE, some communities had developed specialized craft production, with skilled artisans creating pottery, textiles, and tools for trade with neighboring settlements. This early trade network would eventually expand to include regions far beyond the Nile Valley, bringing new materials and ideas into Egypt and contributing to the rapid cultural development that characterized the pre-dynastic period. Chapter 2. The Pre-Dynastic Period: Foundations of Civilization. The pre-dynastic period, spanning roughly from 6000 to 3150 BCE, represents the crucial formative era during which the foundations of Egyptian civilization were laid. This period, which encompasses the transition from the Neolithic Age to the beginning of recorded history, saw the development of the cultural, technological, and social innovations that would define Egyptian civilization for the next 3 millennia. Archaeological evidence from this period comes primarily from burial sites, settlement remains, and artifacts discovered throughout the Nile Valley. Since written records do not exist from this era, archaeologists have named the various cultural phases after the modern locations where characteristic artifacts were first discovered. This naming convention has given us a series of cultures, Badarian, Amratian, Djoser, each representing distinct phases in the development of Egyptian civilization. The earliest well-documented pre-dynastic culture is the Badarian, which flourished in Upper Egypt between approximately 4400 and 4000 BCE. The Badarian people were skilled farmers who cultivated wheat, barley, and flax, and they also domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats. Their settlements consisted of simple oval huts made of mud and organic materials, but their material culture shows remarkable sophistication. Badarian pottery, characterized by its thin walls and distinctive red and black coloring, achieved through controlled firing techniques, represents some of the finest ceramic work ever produced in ancient Egypt. Perhaps most significantly, the Badarian culture provides the earliest evidence for the Egyptian practice of mummification. Badarian burials show clear evidence of deliberate preservation of the dead, with bodies wrapped in linen and animal skins and placed in graves along with pottery, jewelry, and other grave goods. This early development of mummification practices reflects the emergence of complex beliefs about death and the afterlife that would become central to Egyptian religion. The careful attention paid to burial practices suggests that the Badarians believed in some form of continued existence after death, a belief that would evolve into the elaborate afterlife concepts of pharaonic Egypt. The Badarian culture was succeeded by the Amratian period, also known as Naqada I, which lasted from approximately 4000 to 3500 BCE. During this period, settlements became larger and more complex, with houses featuring multiple rooms, windows, and hearths. The Amratian people developed more sophisticated pottery styles, including the famous white cross-lined ware that featured geometric designs painted in white on red clay. They also began working with copper, marking the beginning of the Chalcolithic Copper Stone Age in Egypt. Trade networks expanded significantly during the Amratian period, with archaeological evidence showing connections between Upper Egypt and regions as distant as the Levant and Nubia. This increased trade brought new materials and ideas into Egypt, contributing to rapid cultural development. The period also saw the emergence of social stratification, with some burials containing significantly more grave goods than others, suggesting the development of social hierarchies and the accumulation of wealth by certain individuals or families. The Gurzean period, Naqada II, spanning from 3500 to 3200 BCE, marked a crucial phase in the development toward unified Egyptian civilization. During this period, settlements grew into true towns, some containing several thousand inhabitants. Houses were built of sun-dried mud bricks, and the more elaborate ones featured courtyards, an architectural innovation that would become a standard feature of Egyptian homes throughout the Pharaonic period. Djoser's material culture shows increasing sophistication and standardization. Pottery styles became more uniform across different regions, suggesting increased cultural contact and exchange. The period also saw significant advances in metallurgy, with the production of copper tools and weapons becoming widespread. Gold working also began during this period, with Egyptian craftsmen learning to extract and work the precious metal that would become so important to pharaonic Egypt. Perhaps most importantly, the Djoser period witnessed the emergence of the earliest forms of Egyptian writing. Hieroglyphic symbols began appearing on pottery, ivory labels, and other objects around 3400–3200 BCE. While these early inscriptions consist mainly of individual signs rather than complete texts, they represent the beginning of the writing system that would become one of the most sophisticated and enduring in the ancient world. The city of Abydos, located in Upper Egypt, became increasingly important during the Djoser period. Large tombs were constructed there, forming an extensive necropolis that would eventually become the burial place of Egypt's earliest kings. These tombs, initially built of mud brick, but later constructed of carefully cut limestone, show clear evidence of the emergence of powerful local rulers who could command the resources and labor necessary for such ambitious construction projects. By the end of the Djoser period, the stage was set for the political unification of Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests that powerful city-states had emerged throughout the Nile Valley, with rulers who controlled significant territories and resources. The largest of these polities were located in Upper Egypt, particularly around the cities of Thinis, Nekada, and Hierakonpolis. Competition between these emerging states would ultimately lead to the conquest and unification that marked the beginning of pharaonic Egypt. The pre-dynastic period also saw important developments in religious thought and practice. The gods and goddesses, who would dominate Egyptian religion throughout the pharaonic period, began to emerge during this time, often as local deities associated with particular cities or regions. The concept of divine kingship, which would become central to pharaonic ideology, also has its roots in the pre-dynastic period, as evidenced by the increasingly elaborate burials of local rulers and the emergence of royal iconography. Chapter 3: The Unification of Egypt and the Early Dynastic Period. Around 3150 BCE, one of the most significant events in ancient history occurred: the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single ruler. This momentous achievement, traditionally attributed to a king named Narmer, also known as Menes, marked the beginning of pharaonic Egypt and the establishment of one of the world's first unified nation-states. The famous Narmer palette, discovered at Hierakonpolis and dating to around 3100 BCE, provides our most detailed visual record of the unification process. This ceremonial palette, carved from green schist and standing over 2 feet tall, depicts King Narmer wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other, symbolically representing the unification of the two lands. The unification created a state that stretched from the first cataract at Aswan in the south to the Mediterranean coast in the north, a distance of nearly 600 miles. This unified kingdom was divided into 2 main regions that retained their distinct identities throughout Egyptian history. Upper Egypt, the southern region, was characterized by a narrow river valley flanked by desert cliffs. Lower Egypt, the northern region, encompassed the broad Nile Delta. The pharaohs of unified Egypt adopted the title King of Upper and Lower Egypt, and their regalia incorporated symbols from both regions. The double crown, known as the Setchant, combined the 2 crowns, visually representing the ruler's dominion over both lands. The early dynastic period, 3150 2686 BCE, was a time of consolidation and institutional development. The concept of divine kingship emerged, with the pharaoh viewed as the earthly embodiment of the god Horus. King Narmer established his capital at Memphis, strategically located at the junction between Upper and Lower Egypt. The early pharaohs developed an administrative system based on provinces called nomes, each governed by appointed officials. The first dynasty saw 8 kings working to consolidate the unified state. Den, the 5th king, ruled for approximately 50 years and was remembered as one of the greatest early pharaohs, being the first depicted wearing both crowns simultaneously. Administrative innovations included the development of a sophisticated writing system, standardized weights and measures, and a complex calendar based on the Nile flood cycle. The second dynasty, 2890 to 2686 BCE, was marked by internal strife but made important contributions, including major construction projects at Hierakonpolis and Abydos. Chapter 4. The Old Kingdom, the Age of the Pyramids. The Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2181 BCE, represents the first great flowering of Egyptian civilization. This period, often called the Age of the Pyramids, saw the construction of the most famous monuments of ancient Egypt and the development of the classic forms of Egyptian art, architecture, and culture. The Old Kingdom began with the Third Dynasty and the reign of King Djoser, 2667 to 2648 BCE, whose step pyramid at Saqqara marked a revolutionary development in Egyptian architecture. The step pyramid, designed by the brilliant architect Imhotep, was the world's first monumental stone building and established the pyramid as the standard form of royal tomb. Imhotep was a polymath who served as Djoser's chief minister, high priest, and physician. Later deified as a god of medicine and wisdom, the step pyramid rose in 6 distinct stages to a height of 204 feet, making it the tallest structure in the world at the time. The Fourth Dynasty, 2613 to 2494 BCE, marked the zenith of pyramid building. King Sneferu perfected the art of pyramid construction through trial and error, building 3 pyramids during his reign. His first at Meidum collapsed, teaching valuable lessons. The bent pyramid at Djoser changed angles during construction. His third pyramid, the Red Pyramid, was Egypt's first successful true pyramid. Sneferu's son, Khufu, 2589 to 2566 BCE, built the Great Pyramid of Giza. This massive structure, originally standing 481 feet tall and containing over 2.3 million stone blocks, was the tallest building in the world for over 3,800 years. The precision of its construction is remarkable. The base is level to within just 2.1 centimeters. Khufu's successors, Khafra and Menkaure, built their own pyramids at Giza, creating the famous complex that continues to amaze visitors today. Khafra is also credited with carving the Great Sphinx. Contrary to popular belief, the pyramids were built by paid workers, not slaves. The Old Kingdom was also a period of remarkable artistic achievement. The canonical forms of Egyptian art were established, including the distinctive style of two-dimensional representation. The political structure was highly centralized, with the pharaoh at the apex of a complex bureaucracy. The Fifth Dynasty saw important developments in Egyptian religion, particularly the rise of the sun god Ra. The Pyramid of Unyas contains the earliest known pyramid texts. The Sixth Dynasty marked the beginning of the Old Kingdom's decline, with the long reign of Pepi II, 94 years, seeing a gradual weakening of central authority and climate change contributing to the collapse. Chapter 5. The First Intermediate Period, Chaos and Transformation. The collapse of the Old Kingdom around 2181 BCE ushered in one of the most turbulent periods in Egyptian history, known as the First Intermediate Period, 2181 to 2055 BCE. This era, encompassing the 7th through 10th dynasties, was characterized by political fragmentation, civil war, economic hardship, and social upheaval that fundamentally transformed Egyptian society. The causes of the Old Kingdom's collapse were complex and multifaceted. The extremely long reign of Pepi II had created a succession crisis, as the aged pharaoh outlived many of his intended heirs. The centralized government that had served Egypt so well during the Pyramid Age became increasingly unwieldy and expensive to maintain. Provincial governors, who had been appointed by the pharaoh to administer the nomes, gradually became hereditary rulers who owed little allegiance to the central government. Climate change also played a crucial role in the Old Kingdom's downfall. Paleoclimatic evidence suggests that Egypt experienced a severe drought during this period, with Nile floods failing for several consecutive years. This agricultural catastrophe led to widespread famine, social unrest, and the breakdown of the economic system that supported the pharaonic state. The immediate aftermath of the Old Kingdom's collapse was a period of chaos known as the 7th and 8th dynasties. According to the ancient historian Manetho, the 7th dynasty consisted of 70 kings who ruled for 70 days, a clear indication of the political instability of the time. While this is obviously an exaggeration, it reflects the rapid succession of short-lived rulers who were unable to establish effective control over the country. During this period, Egypt effectively ceased to exist as a unified state. Local governors declared independence and established rival kingdoms throughout the Nile Valley. The north was controlled by dynasties based in Heracleopolis, while the south was dominated by rulers from Thebes. These competing dynasties fought for control of territory and resources, leading to widespread warfare and destruction. The literature of the First Intermediate Period provides vivid testimony to the social upheaval of the time. The Admonitions of Epua, a text that describes the chaos following the Old Kingdom's collapse, paints a picture of a world turned upside down. The land is completely perished, nothing remains, the sun disk is covered, it does not shine so that people may see, the river of Egypt is empty, one crosses the water on foot. Another important text from this period, The Dialogue of a Man with His Soul, reflects the existential crisis that many Egyptians faced during these troubled times. The text presents a philosophical discussion about the meaning of life and death in a world where traditional certainties had been shattered. Despite the political chaos, the First Intermediate Period was also a time of important cultural and artistic developments. The breakdown of central authority led to increased regional diversity in art and culture, as local traditions that had been suppressed during the Old Kingdom re-emerged. Provincial workshops developed their own distinctive styles, creating a rich variety of artistic expression that would influence later Egyptian art. The period also saw important developments in literature and religious thought. The democratization of the afterlife, which had begun in the late Old Kingdom, accelerated during the First Intermediate Period. Beliefs and practices that had once been reserved for the pharaoh and the royal family became available to a broader segment of society. This democratization is reflected in the spread of coffin texts, magical spells and religious formulas that were painted inside the coffins of non-royal individuals to ensure their successful journey to the afterlife. The 9th and 10th dynasties, based in Heracleopolis in Middle Egypt, represented the first successful attempt to restore unified rule since the collapse of the Old Kingdom. These dynasties, which ruled from approximately 2160 to 2055 BCE, managed to establish control over much of northern and central Egypt. However, their authority was constantly challenged by the rival Theban dynasty in the south. The conflict between Heracleopolis and Thebes came to a head during the reign of Mentuhotep II, 2055 to 2004 BCE, who succeeded in conquering the north and reunifying Egypt under Theban rule. This victory marked the end of the First Intermediate Period and the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. Chapter 6: The Middle Kingdom Renaissance and Expansion. The reunification of Egypt under Mentuhotep II in 2055 BCE marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BCE, a period often considered the classical age of Egyptian civilization. This era, encompassing the 11th through 14th dynasties, was characterized by political stability, economic prosperity, territorial expansion, and remarkable achievements in art, literature, and architecture. Mentuhotep Ptah, whose name means Montu is satisfied, was a warrior king who spent much of his reign consolidating Theban control over Egypt. After defeating the Heracleopolitan dynasty and reunifying the country, he faced the enormous task of rebuilding the institutions of pharaonic government and restoring Egypt's prosperity. His mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, with its innovative terrace design cut into the cliffs of the Theban necropolis, symbolized the renewal of royal power and the restoration of traditional values. The 12th dynasty, 1985 to 1795 BCE, marked the zenith of Middle Kingdom achievement. Founded by Amenemhet I, who may have been a vizier under the last 11th dynasty pharaoh, this dynasty produced some of Egypt's greatest rulers and established Egypt as the dominant power in the ancient Near East. Amenemhet I faced the challenge of establishing the legitimacy of a new dynasty while maintaining stability in a country that had recently experienced civil war. He moved the capital from Thebes to a new city called Ichtoi, meaning Sizer of the Two Lands, near the Fayum oasis in Middle Egypt. This location was strategically chosen to provide better control over both Upper and Lower Egypt, while also being closer to the agricultural wealth of the Fayum region. One of Amenemhet I's most important innovations was the establishment of a co-regency system, whereby the pharaoh would appoint his chosen successor as co-ruler during his lifetime. This system, which was used throughout the 12th dynasty, helped ensure smooth transitions of power and prevented the succession crises that had contributed to the Old Kingdom's collapse. Senusret III, 1870 to 1831 BCE, marked the high point of Middle Kingdom power and achievement. A formidable military leader, Senusret III conducted numerous campaigns into Nubia, establishing a series of fortresses along the Nile that secured Egyptian control over the region's gold mines and trade routes. His military campaigns were so successful that he was deified in Nubia and worshipped as a god for centuries after his death. The Middle Kingdom was a period of remarkable cultural achievement. Egyptian literature reached new heights of sophistication and emotional depth during this period. The story of Sinuhe, often considered the masterpiece of ancient Egyptian literature, tells the tale of a court official who flees Egypt after the assassination of Amenemhet I and lives in exile in the Levant before eventually returning home. The story explores themes of identity, loyalty, and the meaning of home with a psychological complexity that was unprecedented in ancient literature. The prosperity of the Middle Kingdom was based on a combination of factors: efficient administration, military success, expanded trade networks, and agricultural innovations. The pharaohs of this period invested heavily in irrigation projects, particularly in the Fayum region, where they created a vast artificial lake that served as a reservoir for floodwaters. These projects significantly increased Egypt's agricultural productivity and supported a growing population. However, the Middle Kingdom's strength gradually declined during the 13th dynasty, 1795 to 1650 BCE. A series of short-lived pharaohs, many ruling for only a few years, suggests political instability and possibly succession disputes. The weakening of central authority allowed foreign peoples, particularly the Hyksos from the Levant, to establish themselves in the Delta region. Chapter 7: The Second Intermediate Period and the Hyksos. The Second Intermediate Period 1650 to 1550 BCE, represents another era of political fragmentation and foreign domination in Egyptian history. This period was dominated by the rule of the Hyksos, a Semitic people from the Levant who established themselves as pharaohs in northern Egypt, while native Egyptian dynasties maintained control over the south. The term Hyksos comes from the Egyptian phrase Hatshepsut, meaning rulers of foreign lands. These people were not invaders in the traditional sense, but rather immigrants who had been settling in the fertile delta region for generations during the later Middle Kingdom. As central authority weakened during the 13th dynasty, the Hyksos gradually assumed political control over Lower Egypt, eventually establishing their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta. The Hyksos adopted many aspects of Egyptian culture, including religious practices, artistic styles, and administrative systems. They used Egyptian hieroglyphs for their inscriptions, built temples to Egyptian gods, and employed Egyptian craftsmen and officials. At the same time, they introduced new technologies and cultural elements from the Levant, including horse-drawn chariots, composite bows, and bronze-working techniques that would have a lasting impact on Egyptian civilization. While the Hyksos controlled northern Egypt, native Egyptian dynasties maintained their independence in the south. The 16th and 17th dynasties, based in Thebes, ruled over Upper Egypt as vassals or rivals of the Hyksos kings. These southern rulers preserved Egyptian traditions and gradually built up their strength for an eventual reconquest of the north. The liberation of Egypt from Hyksos rule began during the reign of Khufu, the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty. Khufu launched military campaigns against the Hyksos, capturing several cities in Middle Egypt and threatening Avaris itself. His efforts were continued and completed by his brother Imhotep, who founded the 18th dynasty and the New Kingdom. Chapter 8. The New Kingdom, Empire and Glory. The New Kingdom 1550 to 1077 BCE, encompassing the 18th, 19th and 20th dynasties, represents the pinnacle of ancient Egyptian power and influence. This period saw Egypt emerge as the dominant force in the ancient Near East, establishing an empire that stretched from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates River in the north. Ahmose I 1550 to 1525 BCE completed the expulsion of the Hyksos and reunified Egypt under native rule. The experience of foreign domination had taught the Egyptians that security required not just strong defenses, but active control over neighboring regions. Ahmose's successors continued his policies of military expansion and administrative reform. Hatshepsut 1479 to 1458 BCE marked a unique period when a woman ruled as pharaoh for over 20 years. Initially serving as regent for her young stepson Thutmose III, Hatshepsut eventually assumed full pharaonic powers and was depicted in royal regalia, including the false beard traditionally worn by male pharaohs. Her reign was marked by peace, prosperity, and ambitious building projects, including her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BCE, known as Egypt's Napoleon, was one of history's greatest military commanders. He conducted 17 military campaigns in the Levant, establishing Egyptian control over Palestine and Syria. His victory at the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BCE was particularly significant, as it established Egyptian dominance over the strategic crossroads of the ancient Near East. The wealth that flowed into Egypt from its empire was unprecedented. Gold from Nubian mines, tribute from vassal states, and profits from international trade made Egypt the richest nation in the ancient world. This wealth funded massive construction projects, including the expansion of the temple complex at Karnak and the construction of numerous temples throughout Egypt and Nubia. The Amarna period, 1353 to 1336 BCE, represents one of the most fascinating episodes in Egyptian history. Amenhotep V, later known as Akhenaten, attempted to revolutionize Egyptian religion by promoting the worship of a single god, the Aten or sun disk, while suppressing the traditional gods. He moved the capital from Thebes to a new city called Akhenaten, modern Amarna, and promoted a new artistic style that departed dramatically from traditional Egyptian conventions. However, Akhenaten's reforms were deeply unpopular with the traditional priesthood and much of the population. After his death, his successors, including the young Tutankhamun, abandoned Amarna and restored the traditional gods. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter provided the world with its most complete picture of New Kingdom royal burial practices. Ramesses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, known as Ramesses the Great, ruled for 66 years and left his mark on Egypt through numerous monuments and building projects. He fought a famous battle against the Hittites at Kadesh in 1274 BCE, and later negotiated the world's first known peace treaty with the Hittites. His building projects included the magnificent temple at Abu Simbel in Nubia and a new capital city called Pi-Ramesses in the Delta. The later New Kingdoms saw gradual decline as Egypt faced new challenges from the Sea Peoples, mysterious groups of migrants who disrupted the entire eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE. Ramesses III, 1184 to 1153 BCE, successfully defended Egypt against these invaders, but at great cost. The empire gradually contracted, and Egypt's international influence waned. Chapter 9. The Late Period and Foreign Rule. The Third Intermediate Period, 1077–664 BCE, saw Egypt divided among competing dynasties and ruled by foreign powers. The 21st dynasty marked the beginning with Egypt, effectively split between Tanite pharaohs in the Delta and Theban high priests controlling Upper Egypt. The 25th dynasty, 747–656 BCE, saw Egypt unified under Nubian rule. The Nubian pharaohs were devout followers of Egyptian religion, who saw themselves as restoring ancient traditions. However, they faced the expanding Assyrian Empire, and by 664 BCE, Assyria had established control over Egypt. The late period, 664 to 332 BCE, began with the 26th dynasty's Site revival. Psamtik gradually transformed from Assyrian vassal to independent pharaoh, achieving complete unification by 656 BCE. The Persian conquest came in 525 BCE when Cambyses II defeated Psamtik III. The First Persian period, 525–404 BCE, saw Egypt governed as a Persian satrapy, though Persian kings adopted pharaonic titles. Despite accommodation efforts, Persian rule remained unpopular, leading to frequent rebellions. Brief independence was achieved under the 29th and 30th dynasties, 399–343 BCE. But in 343 BCE, Artaxerxes III reconquered Egypt. Chapter 10. Alexander and the End of Pharaonic Egypt. Alexander the Great's arrival in 332 BCE marked a fundamental turning point. Unlike previous conquerors, Alexander showed great respect for Egyptian traditions, visiting the Siwa oracle, where he was proclaimed son of Amun. His foundation of Alexandria created a link between Egypt and the Mediterranean world. After Alexander's death, Egypt fell to Ptolemy I Soter, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty 305–930 BCE. The Ptolemies were Macedonian Greeks who maintained Greek identity while adopting pharaonic roles, creating a unique multicultural society. Alexandria became the greatest city of the Hellenistic world. The famous library and museum made it the intellectual capital of the ancient world. The Ptolemies were great patrons of learning, sponsoring translation of Egyptian texts into Greek and creating syncretic religious traditions. Cleopatra v. 769–30 BCE, the last active pharaoh, formed alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to preserve independence. Her defeat at Actium in 31 BCE and suicide in 30 BCE ended nearly 3 millennia of pharaonic civilization. Roman conquest in 30 BCE made Egypt the emperor's personal possession. The traditional pharaonic system was dismantled and replaced with Roman administrative structures. Christianity arrived in the 1st century CE, and by the 4th century, Egypt had become predominantly Christian. The Arab conquest in 641 CE brought Islamic rule, marking the final end of the ancient world. The eternal legacy. Ancient Egypt's story spans over 3 millennia, creating some of humanity's greatest achievements in art, architecture, literature, science, and government. The Egyptians were pioneers in medicine, mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. They developed sophisticated writing systems, administrative structures, and artistic traditions that influenced civilizations throughout the ancient world. The rediscovery of ancient Egypt in the modern era continues to reveal new insights into this sophisticated civilization. The monuments continue to inspire wonder, serving as tangible links to a civilization that achieved greatness through human ingenuity, determination, and vision. The study of ancient Egypt provides important lessons about environmental sustainability, effective governance, and cultural adaptability. The story is ultimately human, of people who created one of history's greatest civilizations through intelligence, creativity, and perseverance. As we stand before their monuments and read their words, we are reminded of the enduring power of human achievement. The civilization that emerged from the Nile Valley over 5,000 years ago continues to fascinate and inspire, proving that some human accomplishments truly are eternal. Ancient Egypt's greatest legacy is its demonstration of what human beings can achieve when they work together with vision, skill, and determination.